This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Now, two pigeons bemoaning the fact you can stream DirecTV satellite-free.
These humans can stream all the top-rated national news channels on DirecTV, and now with no satellite dish.
This just in. Weather, sports, election coverage. DirecTV has it all, but something is missing. The satellite dish.
What are you doing?
I'm reporting the news. Back to you, Bob.
Here's some news. You're a buffoon.
Stream the top-rated national news channels. No satellite dish. Visit DirecTV.com. Internet required. Top-rated news based on 2023 Nielsen ratings.
November is getting close, and that means that the election is right around the corner. For quality coverage of all aspects of the election and expert analysis on top stories from around the world, there's no better place than the DSR Network. Members of the DSR Network get exclusive access to members-only segments of our podcasts, an ad-free listening experience, and access to our Slack and Discord communities where you can connect with fellow members and us. For the month of September, use code SNARK for 30% off your subscription at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code SNARK at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Now please, enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. At the debate this week, Donald Trump gave voice to the deranged lie that immigrants are eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, and since then, things have gotten steadily worse in that small Ohio town. Tensions have escalated, Haitian immigrants living there say they fear for their safety, and on Thursday, Springfield City Hall was evacuated due to a bomb threat. What if this is exactly what Trump and his MAGA allies want? Not that they necessarily want anybody to get hurt, but rather that supercharged social tensions are to them a desirable goal, both because they think this benefits Trump politically and because it excites the MAGA masses. Andrew Egger, a writer for The Bulwark, has a good new piece in which he treats the Springfield story as a window into the darkness and sheer malevolence of the MAGA movement. We're going to talk about all of this. Great to have you back on, Andrew.
Hey, Greg. Thank you for having me.
All right, to quickly catch people up, a lot of Haitians, maybe 15,000, have come to Springfield, many to fill labor shortages there, and the MAGA right decided to turn this idea that Haitians are eating people's house pets into an obsession. J.D. Vance explicitly told his followers to keep the memes on this coming, even after it had been thoroughly debunked. Andrew, why do you think this has caught fire? Why do Trump and MAGA see this as a winner for them?
Essentially what you have here is a city of about 60,000 people in Springfield that about 15,000 Haitians have come to for blue-collar work in the last few years. And so obviously this has created some tensions, genuine tensions on the local level, because this is a town that not a lot of people are moving to, period, right? I mean, the social services are not quite set up to be a town of 80,000 people, much less 80,000 people, a number of whom don't speak English, who, are recent to the country in the first place. This has created some tensions. It's created some strains on social services and things like this. And this is a thing that the city's been working through. But this has all been out of the national limelight. So what we saw just in the last few days was some of these big kind of anti-woke accounts on the internet start putting a spotlight on Springfield. And what they did was they essentially took a couple of screenshots off of a couple of Springfield Facebook pages that were alleging some crazy things about these new Haitians, specifically alleging that people's pets were going missing, that cats and dogs were vanishing off the streets, and that Haitians were butchering them and eating them for food, which we should note right off the bat is completely invented. It's made up. It was hearsay. It was friend of a friend of a friend stuff. News organizations have found the person who made the initial post that went viral. And she's like, well, you shouldn't really rely on me. I was just kind of saying something I heard. But it's become this giant national story now that where you have J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and all of these people weighing in on this supposed epidemic of pet butchery that's happening in this small town. And it's, again, just a completely invented thing.
Okay, so on Thursday, Springfield City Hall was evacuated due to a bomb threat. We don't know if there's a connection to this situation. We should be clear the motive hasn't been established. But we do know Springfield officials have steadily debunked the claims about Haitians. And Trump attacked the Springfield city manager on national TV during the debate with millions watching. J.D. Vance also criticized the city manager. Again, we don't know if that's connected to the bomb threat. But here's the thing, Andrew. Trump and Vance are explicitly, publicly bullying public officials for the act of telling simple truths that debunk MAGA propaganda. Can you talk about this kind of all-consuming need to maintain MAGA fantasy obsessions intact at all costs?
Yeah, and even more than that, I mean, there's such a need to have very clear-cut heroes and villains in the story, right? Like the actual thing that's happening on the ground right now is really it's kind of a story with no bad guys, right? I mean, it's all of these people have come in because they're allowed to, because they're legally here and they're looking for work and they've heard there's good work here. They're contributing to the economic revitalization of the city, so that's a good thing. But also there are these kind of tensions and frictions that the city's trying to deal with, and it's, maybe they're dealing with it badly and maybe they're dealing with it not, maybe they're dealing with it well, but like that's what all these people are trying to kind of get their heads around as like the local leaders of the city, as the city manager and the mayor and the chief of police and all these people. They're trying to like do the right thing for their city and figure all of this out. But in the MAGA story, in kind of like the story that gets kicked around by all these influencers and then by even people like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, that's not the story at all. The story is that you have essentially these like malignant, like diabolical local leaders who are importing these people, right. like in some sort of like deliberate attempt to change the character of the city and just kind of in a villainous way ruin the lives of the people of the native-born U.S. Americans who live there. So it's not just like the Haitians who get villainized, right? I mean, they are getting villainized horribly, but it's also like these people who are just kind of public servants in the area who didn't ask for any of this stuff, who are just trying to like do the job the best they can.
So interesting,
and I think you do. Yeah, and this is one of the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, it's great replacement theory in miniature. I want to point out that they always do this, right? Like, so let's take another example that was also in Ohio. It was the East Palestine train disaster. That was an accident. Everyone was trying to do right by the town and clean the place up properly. Federal officials did everything they could to try and fix the situation as quickly as they could. But all these outside forces came in and turned it into a racialized story, literally racialized, in which elites were abandoning an Eastern Ohio town.
I think one of the kind of undercovered elements of all of this stuff is just how bad it is for the place itself to kind of become a flashpoint like this, where I mean, and this is something I was grappling with in my piece, because some of this stuff is just local rumor mill stuff, but also a lot of these are right-leaning Republican people who themselves have their brains hooked up to the big misinformation machine that is running all the time in MAGA media, and who themselves are getting a lot of their information about what's happening in their own hometown, not from their local leaders, not from local reporters or anything like that. It's not like there's like a widely respected Springfield, Ohio city paper, but from podcasters, halfway across the country who only got their information in the first place from some of these, completely out of context and unverifiable screenshots, which just creates this feedback loop that really, I mean, it makes these people, the people who live there, then feel worse and then feel like more under siege in their own town, just because of this media environment that they find themselves in, and that has real consequences for how they are even able to live their own lives in harmony with one another. I mean, it's a really there's just sewage getting pumped into these people's minds all the time by the information sources that they trust.
I will say that the nationalization of this kind of vicious, virulent right-wing messaging is a real problem. I was driving through Eastern Ohio, 6 months ago or something like that, and I was listening to a local right-wing radio host, and everything he said was stuff that was kind of mainlined directly from that national disinformation machine. And it was all the Texas governor is a hero for resisting at the border, and AOC's a clown and a fool, right? And both those places are just so far from Eastern Ohio, but this is what the people in Eastern Ohio who are hooked into that machine are hearing. I want to read something from the city of Springfield's website, goes to the core of what you're saying. It says basically, immigrants are working in Springfield in industries in great need of workers, including in warehouses, manufacturing, and services. It also says, as you mentioned earlier, the Haitian immigrants are here legally. The town needs these immigrants, and it's trying to make this work. But a key point in your piece is that a lot of the tensions are being stoked by these right-wing media agitators, not just kind of media people in the kind of right-wing media ecosystem, but people who are actually going there to stoke these tensions, showing up there. You looked into this a bit. Can you tell us what you found?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's been a big part of kind of the second act of this story. I mean, you had all this stuff bubbling up on Monday and Tuesday right before the debate, and then you had basically this whole host of podcasters and folks with Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA organization, and I mean, just like a lot of people kind of descending on the town and really putting it in the media spotlight. And there's a lot of just kind of going around and putting microphones in people's face and be like, those Haitians, right? Am I right? Jesus. And I think like it just has put a lot of additional pressure on this whole situation, right? I mean, that's what the certainly a lot of additional pressure on the mayor and on the city manager and all of these folks who, obviously they have a job to do and they have to do that, whether there's a little bit of limelight or whether there's a lot of limelight. But I think that the thing that I keep coming back to is that like there is a totally plausible situation where like a year from now, 2 years from now, Springfield, Ohio is a success story, right? I mean, they find ways to deal with these things. Yes. Again, economically, this is a plus, right? I mean, they're broadening the tax base of the city in a way that, city governments don't go bankrupt and social services don't go bankrupt because you brought in more tax revenue. It's a temporary problem that you need to raise your spend because you're also raising the amount that you're bringing in. So the crunch in schools and the crunch in the health center and things like that. Like these are temporary problems. The problem that is potentially durable is the social problem. It's this social rift. And it's this kind of feeling of entrenchment and hostility between the white people living in Springfield who have lived in Springfield for a long time and these recent Haitian migrants. And I think that is the danger, is that I mean, like everybody should want this to be the kind of thing that can be bridged, right? Yes. That you can have this community and that you can have these tensions, but that people learn how to live together and thrive together. And I mean, that's America, right? And the danger is that you get this sort of thing where everybody digs in and starts feeling like they're enemies and hostile to one another. And that's the thing that a lot of this is contributing to.
Well, that's a critical point. I just want to point out, though, that Trump, Vance, and MAGA absolutely do not want that to be a success story. The last thing they want is people figuring out how to work together in this kind of way that you're describing. I want to play some audio. This is the Springfield city manager, Brian Heck, trying to tamp down tensions.
Springfield is a dynamic community with many positive attributes. It is disappointing that some of the narrative surrounding our city has been skewed by misinformation circulating on social media and further amplified by political rhetoric in the current highly charged presidential election cycle.
And this is the father of Aiden Clark, who was killed in the school bus crash you mentioned earlier, with a Haitian getting convicted of vehicular homicide. Here's the father, courtesy of NBC News.
Do you know that one of the worst feelings in the world is to not be able to protect your child? Even worse, we can't even protect his memory when he's gone. Please stop the hate.
Andrew, here's my question. How is it that Vance and Trump and MAGA leaders are not shamed by this father calling on them to stop the hate? What is it about MAGA and our information environment that makes the wishes of the kid's own father and the wishes of the townspeople utterly irrelevant to them?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, that is an easy one, right? I mean, the the nature of the culture war such that it is, and the nature of kind of the online rage machine that kicks all this stuff up, is that a story like this remains useful to those people and to that machine for exactly as long as it is pushing that machine forward. And the second it stops pushing the machine forward, there's not a lot of damage control or backtracking that needs to happen. It just, the machine and the leaders just look away. They look on to the next thing. They go hunting for the next outrageous story to obsess over and to point their audience toward for a week or two. I mean, you don't hear a lot about East Palestine anymore, right? I mean, and the same thing will happen to Springfield. And maybe the same thing will happen to Springfield relatively quickly because of things like this. But I mean, I think that is the bottom line here, is that essentially what you have here is a story where a community that is dealing with some genuine issues becomes momentarily politically useful to this national MAGA movement, such that it enters the spotlight. And they'll get as much juice as they can get out of the squeeze there, and then it'll be on to the next thing that gets people's pulses beating harder and juicing them to go to the polls for Donald Trump in November.
Well, that's the key point, right? They think that they gain from the energies that are released. So let's talk about that. Trump, Vance, and MAGA want these social tensions. As I mentioned earlier, Vance called on his followers to keep up the pet-eating memes, even after knowing the whole thing was a lie. I said this on here before, but I think he and Trump are basically saying to MAGA activists, enjoy your power to lie in order to dehumanize this vulnerable population. Relish it. Relish your power. Is this some kind of bet that if they energize their people, it'll be enough to win in the Electoral College? I mean, at the same time, it's clear that this kind of weird right-wing obsession hurts them among swing voters they need. They just disregard that, though. What's the ultimate calculation balancing all those things?
Yeah, I do think that if you asked, somebody like Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, they'd say, of course this helps us. This is right in our wheelhouse of kind of unchecked immigration and the kinds of these cultural anxieties that we kind of live in that space. But I also think, like, even if it didn't, like, even if it kind of seemed, because you're right. I mean, I think that some of this stuff could be a turnoff to swing voters. But even if they were not calculating that it was to their advantage, I just think it's just kind of a primal characteristic of the information ecosystem as it's constituted on the right now, the kind of the right-wing conservative media apparatus and the relationship it currently has with the current MAGA Republican base, that you just can't turn this thing off. I mean, the thing that is going to create the maximum amount of outrage is the thing that's going to get the eyeballs in this economy, and that's the thing that drives the dollars at this point in time, because of the way that it is this kind of bizarre hybrid of Fox News and talk radio and influencers kicking things up online on X and other places on YouTube, and that's just the way it's going to be for the time being, right? I mean, like irrespective of the election, these are the kind of things, these are the kind of ways that the current crop of right-wing thinkfluencers know how to interact with their online audience. And this is the kind of story that gets it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're really getting at here is that there's just this kind of metastasizing incentive structure that just keeps kind of feeding off of itself. Isn't that right? I mean, there's a lot of money in it for these influencers, and they know how to drive the eyeballs, as you say. They need this kind of thing in order to keep their people, their own audiences, engaged and worked up, and I guess sending money. In the end, though, I really do think that Donald Trump getting kind of sucked into this ecosystem to the point where he floats this absolutely insane sounding thing at the very moment when millions and millions and millions are watching, tens of millions, and he's got to reach a certain kind of constituency outside MAGA, that hurts him. And in that sense, if he loses very close, but if he ends up losing, partly because of this kind of thing, there'd be poetic justice in this, wouldn't there? In the sense that this kind of out of control, unchecked MAGA disinformation and hate machine just kind of devoured them.
Yeah, I mean, from your lips to God's ears on that, right? But I mean, I think the Trump and Vance distinction there is kind of interesting to me, because in my view, when it comes to the question of, like, is this actually politically helpful, maybe they fall on kind of opposite sides of the coin, because I think that J.D. Vance is a kind of guy who is smart enough to at least try to take something like this and Mott and Bailey with it and just kind of be really cute with a lot of the arguments and use the pet eating stuff as a way to like gin up a ton of outrage and then say, well, maybe the pet eating stuff isn't real, but look at all this other stuff that the media doesn't want you to talk about. And try to like massage it into being just another conversation about the plight of the white working class in the Rust Belt. And Donald Trump is not up to the task of doing that. And I think we saw that at the debate, right? When he just tried to ad-lib it. He was like, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets. I saw it. The guy on TV said they ate his pet. Like that kind of thing is just, it really is hard for me to imagine that playing well and that bringing a single new voter over to him, because he really does just seem like an old man yelling at like the world's silliest cloud. So I do think, very obviously we're both kind of biased analysts as far as this particular question is concerned, but yeah, maybe it hurts him a little bit. Why not?
Well, I sure hope it does, because it really should. That's the bottom line. Andrew Egger, Thank you so much for coming on. It was a fascinating discussion.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it as always.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.